Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments on bicycle travel adventures. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/392, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshifted.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 392nd edition of the Pedal Shift Project. My name is Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, it is the eBike Range Test Part 2, the Takeaway Edition. On this episode, we are going to talk about the things that I took away from the, I think, fairly successful range test that I did last fall. It's a little weird now. When you first heard this, it was sort of like a back in time November kind of thing. And then now here we are all these months later in the middle of winter for me talking about a trip that was, a while ago. Let me start off at the top. 75 miles, I thought was incredibly great. It wasn't obviously on just one charge. I did do a little bit of a top off in Hancock, but honestly, I don't think that added a ton of range. Maybe those last few miles, maybe a touch more than that. That was amazing for the C&O. And I think it also portends some really good news for other reasonably flat terrain. I'm already thinking about what the consequences of that is, and I've got a bunch of different takeaways, and we'll talk a little bit more about what and where I think this e-bike is going to take me here in 2025, and it's certainly already part of the goals that I set on the first episode of this fine year, which we may be returning to center already, but it's just how it goes. Number one, battery management is key. I mean, obviously, right? The ride really underscored the importance of being efficient with battery use. Keeping the e-bike battery between 20 and 80%, you hear a lot. You hear about that for your phones, and now our phones kind of take care of that for us if we let them. That's going to extend the length of service of that battery. But for extended trips, charging to 100% is great. It's awesome. It really extends things, and going from 100 down to, close to zero, whatever the battery management system, the BMS, will allow you to do. That's totally fine. One thing that I will say is that on flat terrain, at least on a towpath like terrain. Now, I think that on paved, I have found that I can go up to pedal assist level 5 if I really want to get going. I don't think I can go any higher than that with the current gearing that I have. I think I learned that in the shakedown ride. But on a towpath-like surface, I'm really not getting much benefit beyond pedal assist level 2. And of course, by not going to 3 like I did for some of this ride, that of course will give me more power for more miles, essentially. So level 1 or 2 really maximizes range on surfaces like that. If I really wanted to kind of put the hammer down on a flat or rolling terrain that's paved, I certainly could go higher, but do I really need to? I'm not used to going that fast. So really, at the end of the day, battery management is going to make the rides more extended. Either I'm going to go longer. That's basically with the pedal assist. And I think that there's probably a sweet spot. There's probably a way to math this out. But I'm probably also going to learn as I go along too, because conditions are always going to be different. The ambient temperature will impact things at least a little bit. Certainly the terrain, how much am I pressing into the pedals? How much am I adding to it? That all matters. But battery management, making sure I keep the pedal assist a little low enough that it gets me what I need and not a bit more. A+, that's what you need to do. There's your first takeaway. Second thing about this e-bike is that the comfort adjustments are ongoing. I'm still not 100% satisfied with how comfortable it is. And I've mentioned this on the ride. I think the saddle, I'm going to upgrade. I thought that the saddle that I had for the Goblin worked on the Goblin, but not on this one. I think with a more upright riding style, I think I'm going to be better served with a higher end saddle, which goes against everything that I've talked about for 392 episodes of this show. I'm Mr. Stock Saddle Guy. Well, as it turns out, I think that a brick saddle in an upright position is actually what I need, what I want. So I'm probably going to do some shopping for that this winter. In terms of what I've got for the handlebars, I really do need to get them up. And, there's two different ways that I could approach that. I could do it myself, like I keep threatening to do, or I could just take it into a shop and have them do it. So I might consider that as the winter goes on as well. The bar extensions weren't perfect, but I think they're close to what I want. But ergonomics, I do want to dial in a little bit more because that upright riding style is different. And although I'm used to it in the Brompton, that just dialed in itself really well. And I'm sure the saddle was a part of it. So I think I'm going to try to mimic as much as I can from the Brompton to this bike and see how that goes. But definitely some adjustments to come. And I'll of course share those with you on the next ride with it. Number three, weather and trail conditions impact performance. This is a takeaway, I think, on every single tour. The weather that I had couldn't have been any more perfect. It was bone dry. We were in the middle of a drought. It eventually broke, of course, but it was nice and it was comfortable. And everything about that made for this being a test to be excellent. The nice thing about having a good ride experience like that was that it allowed me to really kind of eliminate factors. One thing that I couldn't eliminate, though, which definitely I'm sure impacted the range on this, was I had some serious headwinds. You heard it in at least one of the sections where you could barely understand me. I kept that in and cut out certain parts of it, but even my good new microphone couldn't cut out that wind because they were really, really gnarly and certainly kind of shaved off some miles, at least in terms of the range. But that definitely impacted how much effort it took to ride. But compare it without a battery assist, without the e-assist, I would have been just crushed by the end of the day if I was going against those headwinds. With the battery assist, with that pedal assist, boy, it certainly made it feel a lot better than it would have without it. And I think that that's one of the real interesting elements to having an e-bike and the pedal assist is that certain things that can end up making your life hard, like headwinds, those invisible hills. Shout out to Brock Dittus for that one. You can cut through wind real easy when you've got a motor that's helping you. And I thought that was pretty awesome for all this. And headwinds can really make for a tough day, but when you got an ESS, not so much. Takeaway number four, range and effort balance. The ride and in the experiment confirmed that this e-bike can cover 70 to 75 miles on a single charge, so long as a few things are present. Minimal hills, strategic use of that pedal assist, as I've talked about. The thing that's really interesting about all of this is how much it opens the possibilities for much longer distance touring, or bike adventures, or whatever we're going to call them, with the addition of a second battery. But when you look at that, there is still physical effort that's required here, particularly on the longer rides. And I go back to my discussion with Biking Brian when I asked him the question, hey, when you do a ride, how do you feel at the end of a, say, 120-mile day? And he said, basically, it feels like, around a 65-mile day. That's how he feels. So, when you're doing those kinds of miles, you're going to still feel like you've done a full day of riding, even though you've covered substantially more ground. Part of that is, I think, also time in the saddle. Even though you're going faster, you're probably spending at least as much, if not maybe even a little bit more time than you normally do in the saddle. And so as a result, that can be fatiguing. You're still moving, even if you're not putting in, say, 80% of your max physical effort, you're maybe putting in 50. Yeah, you're still gonna feel that at the end of the day. And so as I think about the possibility of adding a second battery, which, spoiler alert, I'm definitely going to do, there's a few things that come along with that. Those longer days are still going to require a lot of effort. And also, that second battery is a lot of weight. These batteries weigh a ton, not literally, but figuratively. And there's effort in kind of compensating for that. Now, obviously, I think the e-assist, the pedal assist, overcomes more than that weight, but it also takes up space. And there's, things that you have to do. There are trade-offs when we are looking at this kind of super duper range that I'm potentially looking at for future bike trip with us. Am I always going to bring a second battery? I think the answer to that is clearly no, unless there's a compelling reason for it outside of just trying to do the super long range days. I could see myself bringing two batteries if I was going to end up doing a trip on the C&O where I didn't have a first night recharge option. So what I can do is just ride the 70, 75 miles for the night and then use the second battery for the second day and then find a place to recharge maybe on that other night. So there's different strategies that one could use with the two battery setup. So more to come on that as I kind of think through those things. And of course, I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes here some of the plans that I've got and how I would use a second battery or if I would use the second battery is going to be contingent on those types of plans. So that was number four, the range and effort balance. It's there. You definitely need to be realizing that even though I'm on an e-bike, you're still feeling it at the end of the day. I was pretty tired after that 75-mile day. Now, 75 miles for me is a long day. That's kind of at the edge of really what I do. I don't tend to do more than 75 miles, really ever. In fact, I have to really think about that for a moment. I've certainly done the ride that I did. I have done, in fact, I know I did that on the Ohio trip, the trip that basically the big trip from DC to Cincinnati. I definitely did the cabin. No, I take that back. I don't think I stated the cabin. You guys can tell me. You listened to the podcast more recently than I did, probably. But I think 75 miles may be amongst the longest days that I've ever done. So, you do feel that even with that assist. All right. So that's range and effort balance. I kind of went all over the place on that. Number five, preparation and redundancy are crucial. This was a successful ride, like no bones about it. But there were some things that I screwed up on. I forgot a bike lock. I was really dumb. I don't know why I forgot a bike lock. That's really kind of critical. I hated being in Hancock without one. Hancock is fine, but I always feel like there's a little bit of a sketch element from time to time. It's probably misplaced in my head, but having a bike lock is, especially with a bike that is I guess expensive. Everybody's bike is at least has some expense to it, but this one's obviously got some really expensive components to it that make it more of a target. So that's important. Misplacing, or I didn't misplace. I lost microphone components. I eventually found them, of course. Now that was just dumb. Underestimating my hydration needs. That was kind of just bad happenstance. I think I drank more water than I thought I was going to need. But, it's really important to be prepared. I talk about this all the time. And this goes into the kind of the concept of what is the balance between prep work and just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. I do think, making sure that you've got the basics with you really matters, regardless of which type of personality you have. I, as a planner, tend to bring a lot of stuff and I tend to think about things all in advance. I'm getting ready for a tour that's going to be coming up within the next few weeks as I'm sitting here and I'm starting to go, oh, I haven't thought about where I'm going to stop for lunch. It's like, well, I don't necessarily need to know exactly where I'm going to stop for lunch, but it's good for me to kind of know as a planner where things are going to be. Am I going to be riding midway through my day? What's somewhere around there? That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. But also making sure you've got the things on you so that when you're out in the middle of nowhere, like I was, that you don't end up having situations. The bike lock was important in Hancock, less important pretty much any place else, but it kind of impacted, I was what I was going to do in terms of getting food and whatnot while I was inside. There was a bit of stress with that. Caught running low on water, probably should have brought more water with me, or at least brought my water filter with me, and I never did that. So little things. Carry spare things. Make sure you've got your hydration supplies. Make sure you got the right tools for what you need. I mean, that didn't end up being a problem for me, but it could have. That's the important stuff, to make sure you're prepared for this kind of stuff. And redundancy, an extra thing as necessary. I guess for me that would have been water, but for the most part, it really didn't end up creating too much of a problem for me, because ultimately this was a fairly successful trip, and I'm really glad about that. It told me one very important thing, and that is, you know what? You did it. You built the bike that you wanted. You built the bike with the capacity that you needed for the things that you want to do. If the battery only lasted, say, 50 miles on a flat, that would have really shrunken down the possibilities for me on future trips. But the fact that it's in that 70, 75 mile range, that really says something about what's in the realm of possibility here. So let's talk a little bit about that as we close out this much shorter episode than the last episode. I think the e-bike is absolutely in my plans for a variety of adventures. So I'm just going to talk about a few of them. I sort of hinted at a few of them in the goals episode a few weeks ago, but here we go. Tra- Starting with the easy stuff, training and biking to and for from DC, really from any place, but with emphasis on the East Coast. Staging of the e-bike is the most limiting factor to all of this. But between Amtrak and just biking back or biking to where I'm at, either the cabin, we got the C&O, of course, and you've got DC, where you've got the East Coast Greenway. There's a variety of different options that are available to me. There's the DC to New York or New York to DC trip that I've kind of contemplated. Philadelphia is another one. Going south is another direction as well. We've got Richmond as a possibility and point south from there. So really some interesting stuff that we can do just with a train ride and a bike ride. You can loop it just as easily with those two things together. And I think that's a real obvious one to consider doing. How I would handle the battery management over those multiple days, that's obviously the big question. The easiest way to look at something like this is to either be in a hotel or a hotel-like place, roofed lodging that has electricity, or making sure that I end up at campgrounds that have electric. So that's something that would happen in the research phase for all of this. So that train bike option, always going to be there. I think that's the best use in the near term for this bike. Also, to be kind of close to home, I think is a good way to do it. Next one, and this is a shout out to the recent loss that I had in my family and the loss of my dad. As I sit here quite literally on the shores of Lake Ontario here in Western New York, my parents' house is right here on the lake. The lake was always really important to my dad. And, he got up every morning and got to see it. And it was the last thing that he saw as the sun went down as well. And so here's the trip that I've been threatening to do for a really long time, and I've got a really good reason for it, sort of as a shout out to my dad, the circumnavigation of Lake Ontario. And that would, of course, check a few boxes that I would use the e-bike for that, but also that would grab me, ding, some international touring. I would need a passport for that to get into Canada and back again. So I think that one is, I don't want to say is a certainty here in 2025, but it really seems like this is the year for it. I've talked about it for many years now, but this I think is probably the right year for it. So I'm looking forward to doing some more investigation on that, and also to be rethinking about it in the context of having an e-bike rather than going acoustic and having more limited time and space. It will take me less time now. I can probably do it in several days fewer than I was originally thinking. So circumnav of Lake Ontario by e-bike is definitely a potential thing for me. More East Coast Greenway riding. I am definitely going to be looking into doing some East Coast Greenway riding, and spoiler alert, I'll be doing that without the e-bike reasonably soon. But I also am going to be doing it with the e-bike. I think that goes hand in hand a little bit with the train and bike from DC option. The East Coast Greenway is both north and south of DC, runs right through it. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. So we'll do something around that. There's also the possibility of doing something where I train to a point that is on the East Coast Greenway, continue in that direction, then train all the way back rather than do train out, bike back. So there's other possibilities as well for the East Coast Greenway, but I am looking forward to doing something more with that route this year. And spoiler alert, it will be happening for sure, just maybe not on an e-bike. Well, hopefully on the e-bike, maybe on the e-bike as well. Last but not least, it's the thing I keep threatening as well. That is the segment by segment cross country ride. I think the e-bike is really built for knocking out large sections of the middle of the country, particularly since I've been going from east to west primarily so far. I think that catching headwinds in that direction is a thing. So having the e-bike to maybe knock out the section from, say, let's see, I need to connect Cincinnati to St. Louis. That's a really big piece that I need to knock out, because once I have that, I've got all the way to Kansas City at that point. I think that that's definitely something that I'll be looking at as a possibility for this year or maybe next year, but that is certainly something that the e-bike would be really superior at another opportunity for driving or training to start and then driving or training on the way back. So those are the things that I'm thinking about right now. I think some of these I could use just the one battery for and just kind of knock out days as I see fit, or going with a double battery and either doing multi-century days, not multi-century days, multiple days of centuries. There you go. That's better. And lots of different potential opportunities that are out there. I'm really excited about the e-bike. I'm really excited about what it brings. It's just another tool in the arsenal here at Pedal Shift for fun adventures that I think are going to make for more interesting listening, I think, and for doing some rides that maybe I was not really considering or had slipped on my list. I'm really stoked for some of these, and I'm really excited to share those with you. So that's it. That is the continuation of the e-bike series. This was the end of the range test. Next up for the e-bike, probably one of these things that I just mentioned here, maybe as early as the spring, maybe later on in the year, but I'm really excited to bring the e-bike adventures to you, the gentle listener.
Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.